that makes reading, holding a book, or even turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for today, Tuesday, April the 14th. Your readers today are Lori and
Lita.
And let's start with the weather. And I was looking at the 7-day forecast here, and on each day there are at least 3 dark clouds. And every other day there's rain coming down. And I hate to whisper it, but on Monday they have those white lacy things coming out of the sky. Flurries in the morning. So variably cloudy and breezy today with a shower and thunderstorm. Thunderstorms can bring localized damaging wind gusts, so be careful. High of 69. There is occasional rain and thunderstorms tonight with a low of 59. Couple of showers tomorrow, but a high of 66. And Thursday, thunderstorms in spots. If you want to be warm, go to Vernon, Texas, 92. But low, Ely, Nevada, 12. The sun rose today at 6:36 a.m., and it's going to set tonight at 7:57 p.m. That's it for the news and weather.
Okay, and starting on the front page is an article, Wilson Foundation paid for search for Buffalo Police Commissioner. When Mayor Sean Ryan chose Erica Shields to lead the Buffalo Police Department, he had the help of a top national search firm that specializes in selecting police leadership. But the cost of that search was not borne by taxpayers. Ian Ott, a Ryan spokesperson, said the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation paid for the consulting services, and the Buffalo Niagara Partnership administered the $42,500 contract with Public Sector Search and Consulting. The Wilson Foundation recognized the importance of getting the search started immediately, and as part of their broader financial commitment to the transition, they made a contribution to the Buffalo Niagara Partnership to cover the cost, Ott said in an email. BNP then contracted directly with Public Sector Search and Consulting on the city's behalf. The search firm identified and recruited candidates, conducted initial interviews, and performed background checks, among other tasks, Ott said. They were responsible for everything leading up to the final round of interviews, he said. Ott said the money would have come out of the City of Buffalo Transition and Transformation Fund, the philanthropic fund the city is in the process of establishing to pay for studies and consulting work as the city works to bring its books into balance. But the city and its partners are in the process of finalizing the paperwork for the fund. A fund agreement still needs to be executed before the fund can operate as intended. Ryan announced plans to establish the funds during his successful run for mayor last year. Since Ryan was elected, some details of the plan for establishing the fund have been made public. It will be administered by the Community Foundation for Greater Buffalo, with promised contributions from the Community Foundation, the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation, and the John R. O'Shea Foundation, totaling $800,000. The fund is modeled on a similar foundation called Invest Detroit, which has been used to pay for housing initiatives and other projects as the city worked its way back from bankruptcy. Spokespeople for both the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation and the Buffalo Niagara Partnership confirmed that they paid for and administered the search process. The Wilson Foundation did not pay Public Sector Search and Consulting directly because it does not sign contracts on projects where it does not directly oversee the process. Structuring the grant in this way ensures appropriate governance, preserved independence in the search process, and aligned with standard philanthropic and compliance practices, Wilson Foundation President and CEO David Egner said in a written statement. Buffalo Niagara Partnership Vice President of Revenue Spencer Farrell said in a statement that the partnership administered the contract but was not otherwise involved in the process. While transition team infrastructure was still being developed, the mayor needed a nonpartisan Buffalo-based organization to temporarily hold funds so the search could begin as quickly as possible, Farrell said. At his request, our organization agreed to do so. The Common Council will now consider Shields' nomination. Ryan hopes to have her confirmed by early May. Council President Joel Ferolito
I don't know.
said he supports the administration's efforts to save taxpayer money through partnerships with local charitable organizations. Public-private partnerships can be beneficial to move our community forward, and I'm happy to see we have this type of commitment to help us grow, Ferlito said in a text message.
Let's talk about the Sabres.
Yeah.
Tickets to Sabres playoff games are quickly snapped up. The Buffalo Sabres playoff tickets that went on sale Monday were gone in a flash. An extremely limited number of remaining playoff tickets went on sale to the public after full and half-season ticket members for the Sabres got the first shot at purchasing seats for the playoffs. That includes current season ticket holders and the approximately 2,500 fans who signed up this year for season tickets starting next season. Fans with partial season ticket packages went next. The sellout does not mean that fans have no chance to see a playoff game in person for the first time since 2011. The Sabres are required to hold tickets for the visiting team, and league and secondary market sellers such as StubHub remain an option, but likely an expensive one.
Yep.
Fans who wanted in had to sign on to Ticketmaster and join the queue to wait for available tickets. At 10:01 a.m. Monday, more than 4,500 people were in the queue. By 10:20, when the tickets were gone, there were more than 20,000 in the queue.
Wow.
Sabres fan Abigail Lee, a Buffalo clothing designer and content creator, didn't snag any of the tickets the team put on sale, but wound up scoring verified resale tickets to Buffalo's first home game through Ticketmaster on Monday morning. She compared the process to a rat race, but it was one she was more than willing to participate in. It's been 15 years since any of us have gotten to see a playoff game, so it will be worth it, said Lee, who plans to go with a friend. Buyers on Monday were able to buy tickets to any of 4 potential home playoff games in the first round. They could buy a maximum of 2 tickets per game. The amount of tickets released to the public Monday was not disclosed by the team. Most of the home playoff tickets, especially for games 1 and 2, were likely snapped up by season ticket holders. The team gave season ticket holders the chance to buy playoff tickets starting on April the 6th. The Sabres recently said season ticket holders received and embraced priority access to pre-sale tickets for the team's first round of playoff home games. The team sold all the pre-sale tickets that were allocated for season ticket holders for the first 2 home playoff games. That's no surprise considering the excitement that the team has created as it has ended an NHL record 14-season playoff drought and sits in first place in the Atlantic Division with 2 games remaining in the regular season. These are the folks that have stuck with us throughout these last several years, and I think they deserve and need that level of respect. And it's something that's truly important to us to make sure that our season ticket holders come first, said Jake Vernon, Chief Commercial Officer for the Sabres. The demand for tickets has been apparent all season long, especially since the team began to take off in December. The Sabres have sold out 17 straight home games, including every one since January 15th, and have 23 total sellouts this season, a remarkable turnaround from having 4 all of last season. The first 2 playoff games are the most popular games because they are the only 2 guaranteed to occur during the best-of-7 game series. If the Sabres get home ice in the first round, then they could play up to 4 home games. Those last 2 hypothetical games for the first round did not sell all of their allocated pre-sale tickets to season ticket holders. The Sabres do not know who their first-round opponent is or when the first playoff scheduled game will be. Fans told many different stories on social media about their experience trying to buy playoff tickets Monday. Some got lucky among the tens of thousands of fans waiting and scored tickets. Some were disappointed about the wait time and being unable to secure tickets once it was their turn. Lee jumped in the queue right at 10 a.m. with 3,000 people ahead of her, and by the time she got her chance to purchase seats about 15 minutes later, she had to go the resale route on Ticketmaster to secure 2 tickets in the 100 level to the Sabres' first home game. She paid $485 each, but did it early enough before some of those seats went up drastically in price. She joked that she'll still need to sell her firstborn child to pay for it. I went last week to a game, and the feeling of being in there is unlike anything else compared to years past. It's just electric, Lee said. I can't even imagine what the first playoff game after 14 years is going to feel like. Missy Johnson grabbed a pair of standard admission tickets for the second home game in the 100 level for $363 apiece after waiting in the queue for only about a minute with 350 people ahead of her after she logged into the waiting room about 15 minutes before 10 a.m. Johnson, a resident of Northwest Pennsylvania who works in banking, will be making the 2-hour trip to Buffalo with her husband to attend that game. They've been in on season tickets in years past, but this will be their first game this season. Other than my card being declined at first because of my credit card company flagged it as possibly fraud, the process for me was way easier than I expected, she said. We have watched every game, though, the past 20 plus years and are huge fans. The excitement is through the roof for the playoffs. Meanwhile, James Urban of Cheektowaga said he was signed on to get tickets by 10 a.m., but it did not take long for the game to be sold out, leaving him disappointed. Within minutes, they were gone, he said. I was so sad I couldn't get any. Ticket prices on the secondary market immediately shot up in price as tickets went quickly through the Sabres. As of Monday afternoon, they were going for between $574 to $1,835 for Game 1. And the get-in price for the second Sabres home playoff game is $400 on the secondary ticket market, Vivid Seats. The team is also hosting a Saberhood block party before each home playoff game, with a party in the plaza and an in-game watch party at Canalside. We encourage fans that did not receive tickets for a playoff game to attend the Saberhood block party, which will be open for every home game, the Sabres said in a statement.
I hope they have good weather for it.
Yeah.
And so the Blue Origin is going to be launching a rocket sometime in this coming week. Cape Canaveral, Florida, the Blue Origin is pushing forward with plans to launch its third ever New Glenn rocket from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, with a liftoff that could come as early as Friday morning. The FAA added a primary launch window to its Operation Plan Advisory on Monday, listing Blue Origin NG-3 Bluebird 7 mission on its manifest for Friday during a launch window from 6:45 a.m. to 12:19 p.m. from Canaveral's Launch Complex 36. A backup date is listed during the same window on Saturday. Jeff Bezos' heavy lift rocket, which is manufactured at nearby Merritt Island, had 2 successful launches in 2025. This third mission looks to reuse the booster named Never Tell Me the Odds, which was flown and recovered last November. The company's first booster was not recovered. Blue Origin is pushing through with the launch despite damage done to one of its testing facilities in Merritt Island last week, a tower known as the Two-Cat, where the New Glenn's second stage gets pressure testing and cleaning, had visible roof damage. During a routine test at our Two-Cat facility in Florida, we experienced an anomaly during test execution, according to a Blue Origin spokesperson. There were no injuries and safety protocols were in place at the time of the test. There is no impact to ongoing production operations.
Does that mean they blew the roof off?
It sounds like it, yes.
Yeah, just a minor anomaly.
Minor, yes. We've had a malfunction. The hardware for NG-3 was not affected, and whatever caused the upper stage issue was not enough to halt the company moving forward with the upcoming launch attempt. On Friday, Blue Origin CEO Dave Limp posted a photo on X of the NG-3 rocket with the payload installed within the fairing, or nosicone, of the rocket. The company on Sunday also posted the rocket rolling out to the pad for a hot fire test. The payload for the flight is another of Midland, Texas-based AST Space Mobile's next generation Bluebird satellites headed to low Earth orbit. The first of was launched from India in late 2025. The satellites, which have 2,400 square feet of arrays, aim to deliver high-speed cellular broadband direct to smartphones. The company's previous Bluebird satellites had only 693 square feet, so the new versions are touted by the company as the largest commercial phased arrays ever deployed in low Earth orbit. Blue Origin has several other launches coming up and revealed its third New Glenn first stage name, No, It's Necessary, a reference to a line spoken by Matthew McConaughey character in the 2014 film Interstellar. The first booster, which successfully launched on NG-1 in January of 2025, was named So You're Telling Me There's a Chance, a reference to the 1994 film Dumb and Dumber. The attempt to land it on Blue Origin's recovery vessel in the Atlantic, though, was not successful. One of Blue Origin's upcoming launches will be moonbound with an uncrewed lunar lander called the Mk1 Blue Moon, which recently completed testing at NASA's Johnson Space Center and is headed back to Florida. NASA is relying on Blue Origin to develop a crewed lunar landing alongside the Starship spacecraft being developed by SpaceX. NASA Associate Administrator Amit Kshatriya said the agency is doing its part to help the two commercial providers hit deadlines. We're in a massive test campaign. We've got a huge test coming up on the Blue Origin Mk1 lander, which will be the kind of smaller version of the lander they want to use to attempt the landing missions, he said. There's going to be a test flight of that this year, and we also have the test of the Block 3 Starship and Super Heavy, which is going up hopefully in a few weeks here. Whichever one is ready first will get the chance to be the lander used on the Artemis 4 mission as soon as 2028. Before that, though, one of both of the landers in development will need to fly and hook up with NASA's Orion spacecraft during the low Earth orbit's rendezvous mission planned for mid-2027. Every day in this program, we're going to be testing big machines, and we're just going to keep getting side by side with them to help them make progress, he said.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time is 16 minutes after the hour. And in world news, Pope Leo pushes back and says he does not fear Trump. Aboard the papal plane, U.S.-born Pope Leo the 14th pushed back on Monday on President Trump's broadside against him over the U.S.-Israel war in Iran, telling reporters that the Vatican's appeals for peace and reconciliation are rooted in the gospel and that he doesn't fear the Trump administration. To put my message on the same plane as what the president has attempted to do here, I think is not understanding what the message of the gospel is, Leo told the Associated Press aboard the papal plane en route from the Vatican to Algeria. And I'm sorry to hear that, but I will continue on what I believe is the mission of the church in the world today. History's first U.S.-born pope stressed that he was not making a direct attack against Trump or anyone else with his general appeal for peace and criticisms of the delusion of omnipotence, which is fueling the Iran war and other conflicts around the world. I will not enter into debate. The things that I say are certainly not meant as attacks on anyone. The message of the gospel is very clear. Blessed are the peacemakers, Leo said. I will not shy away from announcing the message of the gospel and inviting all people to look for ways of building bridges of peace and reconciliation and looking for ways to avoid war anytime that's possible. Speaking to other reporters, he added, I'm not afraid of the Trump administration or of speaking out loudly about the message of the gospel, which is what the church works for. We aren't politicians. We do not look at foreign policy from the same perspective that he may have, the Pope said, adding, I will continue to speak out strongly against war, seeking to promote peace, promoting dialogue and multilateralism among states to find solutions to problems. Too many people are suffering today. Too many innocent people have been killed. And I believe someone must stand up and say that there is a better way, he said. Trump delivered an extraordinary broadside against Leo on Sunday night, saying he didn't think the U.S.-born global leader of the Catholic Church is doing a very good job, and that he's a very liberal person, while also suggesting the pontiff should stop catering to the radical left. Flying back to Washington from Florida, Trump used a lengthy social media post to sharply criticize Leo, then kept it up after deplaning in comments on the tarmac to reporters. I am not a fan of Pope Leo, he said. Trump's comments came after Leo suggested over the weekend that a delusion of omnipotence is fueling the U.S.-Israel war in Iran. While it's not unusual for popes and presidents to be at cross purposes, it's exceedingly rare for the Pope to directly criticize a U.S. leader, and Trump's stinging response is equally uncommon, if not more so. Pope Leo is weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy, the president wrote in his post, adding, I don't want a pope who thinks it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Italian politicians across the spectrum showed their solidarity with Leo. Premier Giorgia Meloni sent a message of support for his peace mission, while the leader of the main opposition party, Ellie Schlein, was more direct, calling Trump's attacks extremely serious. Later, Trump posted a picture suggesting he had saint-like powers akin to those of Jesus Christ. Wearing a biblical-style robe, Trump is seen laying hands on a bedridden man as light emanates from his fingers, while a soldier, a nurse, a praying woman, and a bearded man in a baseball cap all look on admiringly. Yeesh. The sky above is filled with eagles and an American flag and vaporous images. All of that came after Leo presided over an evening prayer service in St. Peter's Basilica on Saturday, the same day the United States and Iran began face-to-face negotiations in Pakistan during a fragile ceasefire, with Vice President Vance leading the U.S. delegation. Vance is Catholic and recently released a book about his faith. During his evening prayer service, the Pope didn't mention the United States or Trump by name, but his tone and message appeared directed at Trump and the U.S. officials who have boasted of U.S. military superiority and have justified the war in religious terms. Leo, who is on an 11-day trip to Africa, has previously said that God does not listen to the prayers of those who wage war, but rejects them. He has also referenced an Old Testament passage from Isaiah saying that even though you make many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood. Before the ceasefire, when Trump warned of mass strikes against Iranian power plants and other infrastructure that an entire civilization will die tonight, Leo described such sentiments as truly unacceptable. In his social media post on Sunday night, however, Trump went far beyond the war in Iran in criticizing Leo. The president wrote, "I don't want a pope who thinks it's terrible that America attacked Venezuela, a country that was sending massive amounts of drugs into the United States." That was a reference to the Trump administration having ousted Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro during January. "I don't want a pope who criticizes the President of the United States because I'm doing exactly what I was elected for, in a landslide to do." Trump added, referencing his 24 election victory. He also suggested in the post that Leo only got his position because he was an American, and they thought that would be the best way to deal with President Donald J. Trump. The Italian Bishops' Conference expressed regret over Trump's words and underlined that the Pope is not a political counterpart, but the successor of Peter, called to serve the gospel, truth, and peace. After touching down in Algiers Monday, the Pope called for peace and the end to neocolonial tendencies in world affairs. His visit will take him to 4 African nations, Algeria, Cameroon, Angola, and Equatorial Guinea, and bring him deep into the growing heart of the Catholic Church. Leo is in Algeria to promote Christian-Muslim coexistence in the majority Muslim nation at a time of global conflict, and to honor the locally born inspiration of his religious spirituality, St. Augustine. God desires peace for every nation, a peace that is not merely an absence of conflict, but one that is an expression of justice and dignity, Leo told a crowd of several thousand people at the monument to Algiers martyrs. At a later meeting with President Abdelhamid Tebboune and other government authorities, Leo praised Algerians for their solidarity and respect for one another, which he said provided an important perspective today on the global balance of power. Today, this is more urgent than ever in the face of continuous violations of international law and neo-colonial tendencies, he said, without elaborating. Leo later visited the country's great mosque and stood silently with his hands clasped in front of him as if in prayer. He thanked the mosque rector for receiving him in this divine space of God, that is also a study center.
Good for him. And moving over to the editorial section from the Buffalo News, better late than never. Maybe good things really do come to those who wait. The residents of Amherst must be all too familiar with that adage as they watch the movement, or lack thereof, of local development projects, particularly the beleaguered Station 12 retail complex. They deserve to get some good news on this project after a decade of stalled or glacial progress. As reported by the News' Jonathan D. Epstein, the developer behind the project ceremoniously lifted the final beam in place on one of 2 new buildings slated for an open-air plaza. Both structures will have rooftop patios. The Sheridan Drive site is morphing from barren, with the exception of Whole Foods and at-home stores as its main anchors, to the beginning of a forward-thinking recreation and retail site. For a project announced 10 years ago and stalled several times, COVID-19, weather, construction costs, the pieces seem to be coming together, finally. As Epstein wrote, 3 buildings are essentially complete, 2 more buildings are underway, and work is set to begin on the 6th. However, none are fully built out for tenants or occupied, even after a host of new tenants have been announced in recent months. However, the first store openings are expected on or about the 15th of October, with additional openings occurring on a rolling basis through the December holiday season. If all happens as planned, it will be a bustling site with between 55 and 60 tenants occupying the entire Station 12 Plaza, joining the Whole Foods and at-home stores on the eastern end. Boston-based WS Development officials are understandably ecstatic. More impressive is that Town of Amherst officials have joined in the glee. Town officials earlier correctly complained and criticized the slow movement of the project and forced the developer to finish the earlier buildings that they had started. Only a year ago, listening to WS Development officials sounded more like Burt Bacharach's song Promises, Promises. Not anymore. Councilmember Michael Zakula echoed public sentiment when evoking excitement over retail spaces and restaurants that are new to this area. The names set to occupy the 2 newest buildings are intriguing. Black and Blue Steak and Crab, the Industrious Co-working Space, Anthropology, Free People, Alo Yoga, Rowan, and Ula Bowls. One of the bigger buildings to the right of the Whole Foods will be occupied by Williams-Sonoma, Pottery Barn, North Face, and a few other tenants. 2 smaller buildings will host Just Salad, Ever Eve, Free People, Warby Parker, Solid Core, and 3 to 4 others to be announced. And a final building will be constructed in the center of the site starting in July. Completion and opening is scheduled for spring or summer of 2027. When the project was unveiled in 2015, it seemed promising with the demolition of the former Northtown Plaza and construction of the Whole Foods Market. But then the momentum ground to a halt. It seemed for a time that the project was simply snake-bitten. Even as recently as last year, projects about store openings were met with understandable skepticism. Now that skepticism is giving way to visible progress. With summer approaching and work crews on site, the long-promised vision is starting to take shape. The development may yet become a destination. And if that happens, it will benefit not only Amherst, but the entire Western New York community. And just flipping over to the editorial cartoon from Gary Varvel is a picture of Swalwell for governor. As you all know, he's been facing some headwinds for his sexual escapades, and he's standing up at the podium with no pants on, and he's wearing underwear that has red hearts on it, and the entire audience is empty, and there's a guy running out the back door, and Swalwell is saying, "I'm suspending my campaign."
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time is 28 minutes after the hour. In my view, Sharon Kramer enjoys imagining conversations with people inside and outside of her life. Imagining the room where it happened. Decades later, I still remember a final exam question from an American history course. We were prompted to choose an episode in history at which we wished we had been present. We had to explain our choices, both when and why. Long before Lin-Manuel Miranda wrote Hamilton, we were invited to be in the room where it happened. I chose to join FDR and his cabinet as they faced the challenges of the Depression. Reading about the implementation of the New Deal captivated me. Instead of being immobilized, FDR and his cabinet found many ways to change people's lives. He knew the nation was in financial cardiac arrest. Radical transformation was needed. I imagine how those leaders solved problems working together to combine vision with pragmatic actions. As a young person interested in the arts, the Works Progress Administration captivated me. How did Federal Project Number 1 come to be? What brilliant minds generated the ideas and then the logistics to give artists in visual arts, music, theater, and writing fields the chance to capture the nation at a crucial time? For example, the photographs of the Dust Bowl meant that the impact of ecological and economic hurt would be meaningfully shared. According to several sources, in just its first year, the talents of over 44,000 artists of all kinds were supported by the federal government. Such an initiative redirected the lives of many, and it intrigued me. An example of how federal funds were used to extend local initiatives is our own Kleinhans Music Hall. It is one of many beneficiaries of economic support to communities, a local masterpiece with its unique beauty housing a hall with exceptional acoustics. Kleinhans was named for Edward and Mary Seton Kleinhans, who bequeathed their estates to fund the building of a much-needed music hall. However, their resources were insufficient to finish the project. The Public Works Administration of FDR's New Deal provided the funds needed to complete the building, an inspiring private-public partnership. All around the country, similar examples exist because of the New Deal. In later years, I have rewritten that exam answer to take me to other rooms. For a long time, I wanted to be with John Williams as he presented directors with the music he had written for their movies. I could hear his blast of brass tied to percussion for George Lucas, introducing the theme of Star Wars in 1977, or the conversations with Steven Spielberg when he presented the theme to Indiana Jones, or the twisting melody of Schindler's List, E.T. Now, my wish is to be in workrooms with Ken Burns and his creative team. His projects stitch together letters, paintings, historical moments. He creates of our collective memories a visual quilt. For the remarkable series on the Civil War, he enabled us to hear so many voices, bringing overlapping and even contradictory dimensions of the war to life. His current offering, Henry David Thoreau, introduces us to a very private man. We get to know the 19th century philosopher, be captivated by his written words, be intrigued by the beauty of Walden Pond. I can picture Burns creating order out of the all-astonishing content he and his team have assembled. And there I now happily place myself in a corner of the room where it happened.
And in another voice, an article submitted by Zakaya Zakir Ansari and Marina Marco O'Malley. The states can make universal child care happen. Parents have spent years organizing, marching, testifying, and refusing to accept a child care system that everyone knows is broken, one that pushes families to the brink and drives dedicated educators out of the work they love. Now, for the first time, Governor Kathy Hochul and the state legislature are aligned on building a universal child care system that could transform daily life for families across New York. That alignment opens the door to a once-in-a-generation chance to guarantee that every child has access to safe, nurturing care and that the people doing this essential work can afford to stay in their jobs. But if the details fall short, Albany will lock in a system that continues to fail families and educators and call it universal. Many of the educators caring for our children are paid wages that don't reflect the skill and responsibility their jobs demand. Programs can't retain staff. At the same time, the Child Care Assistance Program is underfunded, compounding the crisis. There are nearly 20,000 kids on waiting lists, including over 300 in Erie County. Compensation is where the promise of universal child care lives or dies. Lawmakers must include an additional $1.2 billion for CCAP and $500 million for workforce compensation. The Senate has inched into this direction with $500 million for a worker retention grant program, but the Assembly has offered nothing. A universal child care system built on underinvestment will be universal in name only. If Hochul is serious about delivering on this promise, she must be equally serious about asking those at the top to contribute more in taxes. A universal system needs to be rooted in equity, reaching those who need it the most. Black and brown families, low-income families, and immigrant families are already the least likely to have access to affordable, reliable, school-age care. The need doesn't end when children enter school. It shifts. When there are gaps, it's usually mothers who cut back their hours, turn down promotions, or leave the workforce altogether. Universal childcare means a system that is free, accessible, and supported by a workforce that can afford to stay in these jobs. We have the momentum. Let's finish the job.
And Susan Estrich says many are still waiting for a cure for long COVID. My daughter is suffering from long COVID. I have written about it before. I wish I had good news. I don't. It is a nightmare you should do everything you can to avoid. Most people who get COVID get well, but most people doesn't mean everyone. More than 1 million Americans died during the pandemic. And according to the best estimates, as many as 8% of the people who get COVID do not get better. The lingering symptoms are worse, and there's very little to be done with any of them. There's MECFS, which used to be called chronic fatigue syndrome, but now has a fancy new name, myalgic encephalomyelitis chronic fatigue syndrome, to make it seem more real. MECFS is a complex, chronic, neuroimmune disease characterized by profound exhaustion that lasts over 6 months and is not improved by rest. Key symptoms include severe fatigue, post-exertional malaise, cognitive dysfunction or brain fog, and sleep disturbances. If you overdo it, and that may involve doing almost anything, you crash. Your baseline gets worse, and you're even further in the hole. Some people spend their lives in dark rooms with no stimuli. Then there's POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which means your heart rate increases over 30 beats per minute when you stand up. So your body thinks it's running a marathon when you get up in the morning and take a shower. Standing is also accompanied by dizziness, lightheadedness, and fainting. Other common symptoms include severe fatigue, brain fog, palpitations, and headaches. And there's mast cell activation syndrome and hyperlipidemia, not to mention anxiety and depression and severe digestive problems. While COVID targeted the weak and disabled, long COVID is most prevalent among young, healthy people, most of them, as is true of many autoimmune diseases, women. Is that why we haven't funded the necessary research? The first doctor my daughter went to see had clearly never heard of long COVID and didn't diagnose it. Get more sleep, he told her. Then she got COVID again. The long COVID doctor I found for her told her she had an incurable disease for which there was no real treatment other than to try to address the symptoms piecemeal. Stimulants for the exhaustion, heart medicine for the POTS, antihistamines, and Pepcid, each of the medications bringing risks and side effects, and none of it's a cure for the underlying problems. What to do? You hope, you pray, you search for the cutting-edge treatments. You search for the doctors who seem to know more. You try to talk your way into more tests, although tests are the last thing that you want. You keep looking for a problem that they can solve. This is what we need the government to do the research, to find the cure. It will require the same sort of commitment we made to fighting HIV. We found a vaccine that is highly effective against COVID. Is there any reason we cannot cure this disease? One of my friends used to pray that a celebrity would be stricken with her kind of rare cancer. I try hard to wish no ill on anyone, but if someone could only get to President Trump and Robert Kennedy Jr., if only they could see for a day how my daughter and so many of her fellow sufferers live, would they do something? What RFK Jr. has done is close the long COVID office and cut off the research funding. We are left to beg for help.
And from Jackie Kalmus, America is saddled with an unchecked mad king till January. Amid all the alarming and unhinged comments of the President of the United States in recent days threatening Iran with genocide, remarks beyond even the usual cray-cray blather from Donald Trump. It was a statement from his spokesperson last Tuesday that really put the madness in the White House in perspective. Only the president knows where things stand and what he will do, Caroline Leavitt said. She issued those words just hours before Trump's 8 p.m. Tuesday deadline for Iran to either reopen the Strait of Hormuz to international shipping or face Armageddon. That is, war crimes by the United States. The statement from the White House press secretary was as clear a description as Americans could get of governance under Trump these days. A mad king reigns, virtually unchecked. And as a practical matter, there is nothing under the Constitution, neither impeachment nor removal under the 25th Amendment, that can be done about him. There's only voters' opportunity to eject the complicit Republican majorities in the House and Senate in November's midterms to install a Democrat and Democratic check on Trump's for the remaining 2 years of his office. We know that just before Trump's deadline to Iran's warning, a whole civilization will die tonight, he announced a fragile 2-week ceasefire for negotiations. The commander-in-chief declared victory, but so did Iran, and it has the better of the argument. Iran continued to control and monetize passage through the strait, unlike before Trump's war began on the 28th of February, and already on Wednesday it flexed that power by closing the route in retaliation for Israeli strikes. The ceasefire also lets Iran retain possession of its enriched, nearly bomb-grade uranium, and the nation won Trump's offer of possible tariffs and sanction relief. So much for the unconditional surrender. He demanded in a post a month ago. Who knows where things will stand by the time you're reading this? Trump has fluctuated, reversed, and contradicted himself repeatedly, even within a single social media screed or chest-thumping performance for the press, since he ordered war against Iran without notice to Congress, let alone its authorization. He's variously called Iran's leaders crazy bastards and animals, and taken credit for total regime change where different, smarter, and less radicalized minds prevail. Presidential rule by fiat and whim would be wrong in any case under the Constitution's check and balances of power, and specifically of war power. But in Trump's case, America has a president who lately has piled on the evidence that he is mentally unstable, unfit for the office. And spare us the cheerleaders' claim on Fox News about how he's playing multi-dimensional chess, when even Alex Jones likens Trump to Crazy King Lear and calls for invoking the 25th Amendment to remove him from power, echoing former Trump promoters, including Marjorie Taylor Greene and Candace Owens, among others. You know he's crossed the line by his unilateral war-making and profane threats on Easter Sunday of genocidal apocalypse. Evidence of Trump's dangerous instability has been there from his political genesis. In his first term, he warned he'd unleash fire and fury like the world had never seen against nuclear-armed North Korea, then declared that he fell in love with dictator Kim Jong-un without achieving any diminution in Kim's arsenal. He celebrates the death of political enemies and prosecutes those still living. He repeatedly interrupts himself on some political question to bloviate about his ballroom plans. He's ordered armed agents into American neighborhoods on immigration raids that expressed neither responsibility nor remorse when citizens died and legal residents got deported. The national security leaders of his first term let it be known that they'd prevented him from acting on his worst impulses, but there's no chance of that from Defense Secretary Peter Hegseth. Retired General Mark Milley, a former chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 2021, described first-term Trump as being in mental decline and fascist to the core. You'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who thinks Trump has gotten better in the intervening 5 years. The country can't be a therapy session for a troubled man like this, Trump's first-term Attorney General William Barr told CBS in 2023 as Trump campaigned to return to office. If only the presidency were therapy for Trump. Instead, he's like a power addict in the world's most powerful job, mainlining its intoxicants, and no one will stop him. Only people with extraordinary egos seek the White House in the first place, but when an actual egomaniac inhabits that warping bubble of butter-uppers, there's danger. I remain haunted by the words of retired General John F. Kelly, Trump's first-term Homeland Security Secretary and then White House Chief of Staff, who in 2023 said of Trump's potential re-election, "God help us." Having failed twice to convict and remove Trump in his first term, Democrats have shied from a third attempt until now. Scores in Congress have called for impeachment or invocation of the 25th Amendment. There's some value in sending a message, but Democrats are off-airing supporters' false hope. A Republican-led Congress and a cabinet of clownish sycophants will not exercise the powers they have, even against a mad king. The authors of the Constitution, having thrown off a king, debated at length how to guard against a power-crazed president. But they didn't anticipate political parties that put tribal loyalty over the country. That partisanship has rendered the high bars to a president's removal a vote of 2/3 of the Senate for conviction after impeachment, or, under the 25th Amendment, action by the Vice President and a cabinet majority, all but insurmountable. That leaves the voters, who in special and off-year elections have shown their zeal to punish Trump's party. We can hope that a new Congress will check come January, and we can pray.
And, according to L.Z. Granderson, Christians know faith lessons don't belong in our public schools. We had so much going on this week with the new season of Euphoria coming out and the president threatening to wipe out a 2,600-year-old civilization that it's easy to miss things like the latest attempt by conservatives to reshape the U.S. into a theocracy. Not satisfied with shoehorning Bible stories into its English curriculum and then to push the Ten Commandments in public classrooms, the Texas Board of Education is now considering adding Bible verses to the required reading list for students. Among the scriptures the board is considering are Psalms 23, the story of Jonah and the whale, and Lamentations 3, which talks about keeping your faith in God in good times and in bad. Compiled together, the scriptures that officials are considering read like pages torn from Chicken Soup for the Christian Soul, which as a Christian I appreciate. However, as an American, I vehemently oppose. For one of the country's largest providers of public education to consider requiring students to read Bible verses feels like a grenade being hurled at the wall separating church and state. However, when you factor in similar challenges from other red states, such as Louisiana, which also wants to display the Ten Commandments in public classrooms, or Oklahoma, whose attempt to use public funds to create a religious online charter school was blocked by the Supreme Court last spring, it's clear state officials in red states have launched a full-on coordinated attack, which means the collection of warm and fuzzy scriptures being considered in Texas is likely just a Trojan horse to enter to either bring in more extreme theology next or to force another visit to this conservative Supreme Court. And recall, it was the court's ruling on an anti-abortion law out of Texas back in 2021 that set the stage for overturning Roe v. Wade the following year. In a country in which more than 60% of people identify as Christian, there may be a temptation to view the Ten Commandments in public schools as innocuous. Most of the content is uncontroversial. Murdering and stealing are bad. Lying and cheating are things one should not do. However, how does a state government reconcile displaying, "You shall have no other gods before me," in a democracy in which a third of the citizens may have another god or no god at all? And why place public school teachers, many of whom are not Christians themselves, in a position in which they may have to explain that religion's doctrine? If Governor Greg Abbott saw fit to sign Senate Bill 12, a so-called parents' rights law banning school employees from discussing gender identity and sexual orientation with their students, why would parents want teachers talking to kids about faith? Even among the 2/3 of Americans who identify as Christians, many denominations purport to take the Bible literally, while others consider it divinely inspired. So when questions about Jonah and the whale pop up, do you want teachers to talk about the theoretical logistics of breathing inside a fish, or about the symbolism of a minority culture resisting assimilation? Or would you rather that this topic simply not be raised in the classroom? The desire to do good in the world is admirable, and I'm not so cynical as to think each attempt to bring religion into the public square is inherently nefarious. However, just as Chinese monks during the Tang Dynasty set out to create an elixir to prolong life and instead invented gunpowder, or as Alfred Nobel created dynamite for infrastructure only to watch his invention to be used in war, the original intent of religion is often in conflict with how it comes to be used. One of the main reasons the Bible was circulated in English in the first place was to serve a less than holy agenda. The Catholic Church wouldn't grant England's Henry VIII a divorce, so he sought to make up his own religion to get his new wife. And when the new wife did not provide him with a son, he had her beheaded. Apparently, in his version of Christianity, doing so was perfectly fine in the eyes of God. As king, he was above challenges in the courts, and there was no free press to hold him accountable. Let that sordid chapter serve as a reminder. Regardless of faith, we all should want the wall between church and state to stay just where it is.
And Ingram Micro is moving downtown. With over 2/3 of employees present and a DJ blaring music, Ingram Micro opened its new office at Genesee Towers on Monday morning, welcoming 1,200 workers to downtown Buffalo in what officials hope will be a jolt of new energy for the city's restaurant retailers and other businesses. The arrival of the global technology services company bolsters downtown workforce at a time when city and business leaders are still trying to figure out how to regain the vitality that the city was experiencing up until COVID-19 hit 6 years ago and drove everyone home. Many of those workers have never come back full-time, and that's why Ingram Micro's move is being heralded as a big step forward for downtown. That's exactly what we need as we're recovering the vitality of downtown Buffalo, said Mayor Sean Ryan. Momentum breeds momentum. Having a company of Ingram's character, ability, and reputation, it's great to have them here. With an estimated 20,000 fewer workers coming downtown each day than before the pandemic, many businesses are struggling to get enough traffic and sales to stay open. Street activity is still significantly diminished. There are more homeless people on the streets, and there's been a nagging safety perception that downtown advocates are hoping to dispel. City officials have been encouraging employers to bring more workers back full-time to the office. Two big downtown employers, M&T Bank and Delaware North, recently mandated that workers come into the office 4 days a week rather than 3. Ingram Micro requires workers to be in the office 3 days a week. The city is also working on ways to enhance downtown, boost connections between different areas, and bring more people in from suburbs for concerts and other special events. The decision by Ingram Micro, a Fortune 500 company, is a significant vote of confidence, and its CEO and other company executives were quick to voice their support for the city and the opportunity that being downtown creates for their employees, their vendors, and their customers. Lori?
And let's look at the royal stars. Happy birthday for Tuesday, April 14th. You are a curious social butterfly who is in touch with your environment. You're intellectual and physically restless with strong emotions. This is a year of new beginnings, adventures, and major changes. If you're Aries, this is a feel-good day. Behind the scenes, research might boost your earnings, bring you money, or help with an important purchase. Family relations and issues at home are solid. Tonight, just seek solitude. If you're Taurus, this is a great day to schmooze because your social skills are excellent today. Friends and group might help you promote something that's important to you. Tonight, be friendly. Geminis, you make a fabulous impression on others today, and this might directly or indirectly lead to a chance for you to boost your income because tonight you're admired. Cancer, travel opportunities abound today. Act on these if you can because travel for pleasure, especially with a friend, will please you. Tonight, explore those ideas. Leo's financial negotiations about shared property taxes, debt, and insurance will go well today. Don't hesitate to demand the advantage because you have it. Tonight, just check your finances. Virgos, be prepared to cooperate today. You might have to go more than halfway with a spouse, partner, or a close friend. Tonight, just be cooperative. Libras, work-related travel is likely today. You can also look for ways to expand what you're doing, especially through working with groups. Tonight, get yourself organized. Scorpios, accept all opportunities to schmooze and socialize with others. This is a fun day. Meanwhile, work-related issues or something to do with your health might hold a few surprises for you. Tonight, you must relax. Sagittarius, family discussions will go well today. This is a great day to entertain at home or to enjoy your own company in familiar surroundings because tonight you should just cocoon at home. Capricorns, today you feel optimistic, upbeat, and happy, which is why you're full of big ideas and enthusiastic suggestions. Meanwhile, your home routine might be interrupted today because tonight you will have to have some discussions. Aquarius, respect your money-making ideas because you might boost your income today. Meanwhile, pay attention to everything you say and do. Tonight, you have to check your belongings. And finally, Pisces. Today, the moon in your sign, dancing with lucky Jupiter, ensures your relationships with others will be warm and friendly. And tonight, you're strong. That was upbeat for everybody.
Yes. And now, as part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. Robert H. Erickson, Philip A. Faust, Robert, known as Dick Goltz, Donna M. Hasenfratz, nee Pusatari, Irene Glowacki, nee Linsicki, Peter T. Martina, Jr., Harvey Podolsky, Margaret, known as Peggy Ritter, nee Travis, Marilyn Rosen, and I'm going to go over here. So, Bob Hall, a 74, a father of wheelchair racing marathon winner. Bob Hall was a childhood polio survivor who became known as the father of wheelchair racing after twice winning the Boston Marathon and then going on to build racing chairs for the generations of competitors that followed. He was 74 years old when he passed away. The Boston Athletic Association said on Sunday that Hall's family confirmed his death after a long illness. In 1975, Hall convinced Boston Marathon organizers to let him into the race and was promised a finisher's certificate like the one the runners got if he completed the 26.2-mile distance in under 3 hours. In 1970, Vietnam War veteran Eugene Roberts, who had lost both of his legs in the war, needed more than 6 hours to finish. Hall crossed the line in 2 hours and 58 minutes. It had nothing to do with, per se, the marathon, but it was about the inclusion, Hall said last year when he served as a Grand Marshal in Boston on the 50th anniversary of his pioneering stride. And now I'm going to flip over to John Nolan, who is 87, an actor in Batman and person of interest. John Nolan, a veteran British stage and screen actor, and the paternal uncle of filmmakers Christopher Nolan and Jonathan Nolan, who appeared in their work including a pair of Batman movies and on the CBS drama Person of Interest, has died. He was 87 years old. The actor died Saturday, according to the Stratford-upon-the-Avon Herald, a British weekly. Nolan had a career that spanned decades and included turns in his nephew's projects. He portrayed Wayne Enterprises board member Douglas Fredericks in 2005's Batman and Begins, and in 2012, The Dark Knight Rises, both co-written and directed by Christopher. He also appeared in 1998 and 2017's Dunkirk, both also written and directed by Christopher.
You're listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for today, Tuesday, April the 14th, on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your readers today are Lori and
Lita.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcasts easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
And we'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your readers are
Lori
and Lita. And let's flip over to some local stuff here. Fisher defends Pope after Trump attack. The leaders of the region's more than 500,000 Catholics joined other American bishops and cardinals Monday in defending Pope Leo XIV against a recent social media post by President Trump that disparaged the pontiff as being weak on crime and catering to the radical left. Trump's post Sunday night on his Truth Social platform also claimed the only reason that the Chicago-born Pope was elected in 2025 as head of the world's 1.4 billion Catholics was because Trump was president. The president's angry post came in response to the Pope's continuing criticism of the war in Iran and his calls for peace. Bishop Michael Fisher, leader of the Buffalo Diocese, in a statement Monday morning, said the Holy Fathers rightly invoked the gospel of Jesus Christ, calling for an end to the war with Iran and the suffering it has inflicted on so many innocent civilians, children, the elderly, and the most vulnerable, while perpetuating hatred and division that only serves to fuel generational conflict. Fisher also urged all who have the ability to bring about peace to come together and do so. This is not about politics, but the very cause of humanity and our obligation to seek understanding, reconciliation, and pursue those mutual interests that bind us to one another, regardless of ethnic, racial, or geographic division, said Fisher. In his post, Trump also said that Leo should focus on being a great pope, not a politician. It's hurting him very badly, and more importantly, it's hurting the Catholic Church, the president wrote. The Pope, meanwhile, denied he was a politician and said he had no fear of the Trump administration in remarks to journalists aboard his plane. Leo said his comments are certainly not meant as attacks on anyone, and the message of the gospel is very clear. Blessed are the peacemakers.
And lessons learned in the 1970s take the sting out of oil shocks. Washington, the world economy is experiencing a disorienting flashback to the 1970s. Oil prices are once again surging in the wake of war in the Middle East, driving up the cost of gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, and threatening a return to stagflation, the toxic mix of higher prices and slower growth that made economic life so miserable a half-century ago. But the U.S. and world economies are less vulnerable now than they were when Saudi Arabia and other Middle Eastern petroleum producers withheld oil supplies to punish countries that supported Israel in the 1973 Yom Kippur War. In response to that shock, and another triggered 6 years later by the Iranian Revolution, countries embarked on a new course to increase their energy efficiency, reduce their dependence on Middle Eastern oil, stockpile fuel against future threats, and find and develop alternative sources of energy. We have decades of experience now dealing with these kinds of oil shocks, said Amy Myers Jaffe, a research professor at New York University's Center for Global Affairs. Of course, the notion that the current Iran energy shock could have been worse is little comfort to frustrated American motorists paying $4 or more for a gallon of gasoline. And the sheer scale is unprecedented. In response to attacks by the United States and Israel that began February 28th, Iran effectively shut off the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20 million barrels of oil, or 1/5 of global production, flowed daily. Lutz Killian, director of the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas Center for Energy and the Economy, figures that 5 million daily barrels can either be rerouted from the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea or continue to transit through the Strait of Hormuz. But that still means that roughly 15 million barrels, or 15% of daily global oil production, is missing, compared with just 6% in the 1973 embargo and after Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in 1990. Changes the U.S. and other countries made over the past 5 decades have limited the economic fallout from the war. In 1973, oil accounted for almost half, 46%, of world energy supplies. By 2023, oil's share had fallen to 30%, according to the International Energy Agency. The world still uses more oil than ever. Consumption topped 100 million barrels a day last year, up from fewer than 60 million barrels a day in 1973. But a much bigger share of global energy is coming from other sources, such as natural gas, nuclear, solar, compared with 5 decades ago. The United States in particular has weaned itself away from dependence on foreign oil. When the 73 oil shock hit, Americans' domestic energy production was in decline, and its reliance on oil imports was growing alarmingly. But the rise of fracking, pumping high-pressure water deep underground to extract previously hard-to-get oil or gas from rock, rejuvenated U.S. energy production in the 21st century. By 2019, America had become a net petroleum exporter. The U.S. economy is much better positioned than it was in the 1970s, when it was particularly vulnerable to an oil price shock, said Sam Ori, executive director of the University of Chicago's Energy Policy Institute. In the early 70s, for example, the United States got about 20% of its electricity from oil. But a law enacted in 1978 prohibited the use of petroleum in power plants. Now the United States gets no electricity from oil, aside from a few generators in, say, the far reaches of Alaska. The 1973 oil embargo was a wake-up call, creating shortages that led to long lines at U.S. gasoline stations. The U.S. government began imposing fuel economy standards back in 1975. Fuel economy has risen from 13.1 miles per gallon for model year 75 vehicles to 27.1 in model year 23, according to the Environmental Protection Agency. The World Bank, in fact, attributes most of the drop in global economy's dependence on oil to stricter fuel efficiency requirements for vehicles around the world. The 70s shock also set off a search for oil outside of the Middle East. Prudhoe Bay in Alaska, the North Sea fields off the coast of the United Kingdom, and Norway and Canada's oil sand deposits.
And New York lawmakers have passed a third extender amid late budget, officials taking potshots at Hochul. With the state budget nearly 2 weeks late, lawmakers on Monday passed a $3.4 billion bill to fund state operations through Thursday. It marked the third extender bill lawmakers have enacted since they missed the deadline to pass an on-time budget on the 1st of April. And it came with a slight dig at Governor Kathy Hochul, who has been negotiating the budget with Assembly Speaker Carl Heastie from the Bronx and Senator Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins from Yonkers. Can you tell us what the holdup is? Senator Thomas O'Mara from Big Flats, the ranking Republican on the Senate Finance Committee, asked Senate Deputy Majority Leader Michael Gianaris from Queens before the Senate approved the extended bill. Gianaris told O'Mara, whose district includes eastern Wyoming County, that the outstanding issues were all unrelated to dollars and cents, which he said was frustrating to many legislators. Heastie has repeatedly complained about Hochul's inclusion of policy issues in the budget, which governors are permitted to do under a Court of Appeals ruling on a legal battle between former Governor George Pataki and late Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver. It takes three parties to agree, and the person who has proposed the budget seems less than willing to appreciate that, Gianaris said, referring to Hochul. Hochul introduced a now $263 billion budget in January. In March, the Assembly passed a $266 billion spending plan, and the Senate passed a $270 billion plan. Hochul and the legislative leaders have clashed on proposals to lower auto insurance costs. The governor's proposed changes to New York's environmental review process and Hochul's plan to set new deadlines for the state's 2019 climate law. The Assembly passed the extender bill in its House after the Senate. It is the seventh consecutive year that lawmakers have missed their April deadline to pass a budget. The extender sets up lawmakers to pass a fourth extender bill on Thursday. It's Groundhog Day all over again, O'Mara said, referring to a movie where a man relives the same day over and over. Except now we get to do it twice this week, and really no progress being seen.
And Ryan shares street paving list, new technology for mapping potholes. Mayor Sean Ryan says the city will be partnering with a technology firm to digitally map public infrastructure to identify the roads and sidewalks that are most in need of repair in future years. In announcing this year's paving list, Ryan said the city will partner with CYVL, a company that has software that creates a three-dimensional digital map of all city roads and sidewalks with the power to show the depth of an individual pothole. We'll be able to make sure we're putting our efforts on where things are the worst, Ryan said at a Monday press conference. Then we'll be able to proactively see which roads are failing, where sidewalks are unsafe, and where we're falling short on accessibility. Deputy Mayor Benjamin Swainkamp said the cost of the service is about $400,000, but will be paid for mostly out of federal grants to help the city fix sidewalk issues that put them out of compliance with Federal Americans with Disability Act. In the city of Buffalo, sidewalks are the responsibility of the adjacent property owner, Swainkamp said. The data from this will help us send letters to property owners, notifying them of what they need to do to keep their properties up to code. Ryan said that this year's paving list was compiled with the traditional means of resident feedback, Common Council member input, and the tracking of problem streets by the Department of Public Work employees. The city is also working to complete streets on last year's paving list, some of which was delayed by the ongoing dispute between the mayor's office and city comptroller Barbara Miller-Williams over bonding dating back to former Mayor Christopher Scanlon's time in office last year. The full list is available on the city's website, which includes a map with the status of each project, and you can find that at Buffalo, New York, buffalony.gov/865/street-resurfacing. And there's just an ironic picture here I have to describe for you. It's kind of got a lot of grays and dark murky green in it, and it's of a gentleman under a clear umbrella. And it says Theo Stiles carries an umbrella as he walks down Washington Street in the rain on his way to work Monday morning. And here's the ironic part. They say Western New York is a beautiful place, and each day the Buffalo News gives you a photo to prove it. I don't think that was a proof, but go ahead.
That's a good try. And also, Erie County Blue Collar Union has agreed to a 5-year contract, and that includes your snowplow drivers. Okay. A new 5-year labor agreement has been reached between Erie County and the union that represents some 1,400 of its blue-collar employees. The deal offers larger upfront pay increases, followed by a 2.5% pay raise for the last 3 years of the contract, according to a news release from the county. The American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employee Contracts covers many employees in the Department of Public Works and Parks, including sewer and highway employees, and it also covers employees who work at Erie County Medical Center and the county libraries. The new contract deal was ratified by 84% of the membership. The contract begins in January and runs through December of 2031. Members of AFSCME Local 1095 would receive a $1.20 per hour increase at the start of the contract, adding an additional $2,496 per year for full-time workers. Depending on each member's current base salary, that first-year raise could amount to a 3% to 6% pay increase, said the president, Richard Canazzi. That would be followed by a 2.75% increase in the second year, followed by 2.5% for the remainder of the contract term. Canazzi said the union was motivated to reach a deal before state and federal financial pressures hurt the ability for members to see raises. He also said that for the first time, the union made no monetary concessions in other parts of the contract, like employee benefits only on certain work rules. Our insurance didn't go up, he said. We didn't lose any time accruals or vacation time, and we didn't lose any holidays. So we pretty much stayed status quo, and the type of raises that we got, cost of living, are pretty standard for public employees. It was important that we went in there before the bottom fell out on the federal government and the state with their delay that they're having currently with their budget, he said. Canazzi said negotiations between the union and the county, led by Labor Relations Commissioner Kola Justatawa Adniji, were respectful, productive, and realistic, resulting in a deal in less than half a dozen face-to-face meetings. County Executive Mark Poloncarz said in a statement, "My administration has a long track record of successful negotiations with the bargaining units that make up the county workforce, and we have always approached these talks with a reasonable budget outlook paired with great respect for the men and women who work for the county. As we have seen in the past, strong negotiations result in good outcomes for all parties, and this new AFSCME agreement benefits workers while being fiscally prudent for the county." The county news release did not provide information about the total cost of the contract deal. Canazzi said the union also agreed to allow the county to offer voluntary, unpaid leave during less busy periods within any department or program area, instead of requiring all employees to come to work unless using their paid time off. Limits were placed on allowing voluntary unpaid leave so that the leave time does not compete with employees who want to use their paid vacation time around the holidays, he said. There's also a cap on how many hour employees can voluntarily remain on unpaid leave so their retirement benefits aren't compromised. In addition, to assist with recruitment, Kanazi said the county agreed to raise motor equipment operator job titles to a higher paying job group to assist with recruitment. Motor equipment operators include workers who plow and salt winter roads, mow grass, and use heavy equipment during construction season. While this next contract is not as generous as the current one, which expires this year, he said, it was negotiated in a tougher fiscal environment, unlike when the last contract was negotiated during a time when federal money poured into the county due to the COVID-19 health crisis.
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 16 minutes after the hour. And information about an officer may aid a defendant in a murder retrial. A retired police officer contacted the Erie County District Attorney's Office with information about a key prosecution witness in Brian Scott Lorenz's murder trial, and the information may be helpful to Lorenz's defense, prosecutors said. Monday's disclosure in court pertained to David F. Bentley, a retired City of Tonawanda police detective who investigated the 1993 slaying of Deborah A. Mendel, whose defense attorneys have previously described as corrupt. The information was identified by prosecutors as being favorable to Lorenz's defense. Assistant District Attorney Gene Partridge described the information as Brady material, named for the U.S. Supreme Court case requiring prosecutors to turn over evidence that could be favorable to defendants. Partridge did not provide any further description of what the retired officer said about Bentley. The disclosure came as prosecutors continued presenting their case against Lorenz, who is on trial for Mendel's killing for the third time. Lorenz, age 56, faces murder and burglary charges for the February 17, 1993 homicide of Mendel, a mother of two, and a nursing student in her City of Tonawanda home. An investigator for the district attorney's office received a cold call on Friday from a retired North Tonawanda police officer, Partridge said in court. Partridge received a page of notes from the investigator, and the DA's office is continuing to follow up. Bentley testified at last year's retrial and is expected to be called as a prosecution witness during the current trial. Lorenz's defense attorneys have questioned the quality of the police investigation into Mendel's killing, and at Lorenz's retrial last year accused Bentley of coaching a vulnerable witness who testified at the original trial back in 1994. Much of the defense's criticism of Bentley stemmed from his interview of Nancy Hummingbird, a longtime friend of Lorenz's former co-defendant James Pugh, against whom charges were dropped last year. Hummingbird testified at Lorenz and Pugh's original trial that Lorenz made statements implicating himself in the slaying. At Lorenz's second trial last year, defense attorneys played an audio recording of a 1993 interview of Hummingbird by Bentley, which took place before the original trial. Defense attorneys described the interview as less focused on getting to the truth of what happened to Mendel and more about manipulating Hummingbird into saying things that would help Bentley's case. In the recording, Hummingbird sounded unsure about basic facts of the crime. Before interviewing Hummingbird, Bentley called her on the phone and said her son may be involved in a burglary and homicide, despite acknowledging later that he pretty much knew her son wasn't involved. Bentley, on the witness stand last year, denied this. A state appellate court has said there was considerable evidence that Bentley pressured many witnesses to incriminate and testify at that 1994 trial. Lorenz's conviction for Mendel's murder was overturned in 2023. Bentley, who began his career working for City of Tonawanda Police in 1976 and who retired in 2003, told the Buffalo News in 1996 that he had been the target of at least 15 complaints of police brutality and harassment. In 2021, he told the News a lawsuit against him ended with the accuser getting paid $25,000. Prosecutors said last year that police documents show no complaints against Bentley were sustained or founded. Bentley knew convicted murderer and notorious prisoner escapee Richard Matt. A theory that developed out of the district attorney's reinvestigation of the Mendel slaying suggested Matt may have been involved in Mendel's murder. Defense attorneys have been barred from arguing that theory at Lorenza's retrial. On Monday, the jury in Lorenza's current trial listened to a readback of a script from Hummingbird's 1994 trial testimony. Hummingbird died in 2019. Jurors also listened to the 1994 testimony of Jessica Mendel, Deborah Mendel's daughter, who found her mother's body the day she was killed. Jurors also heard testimony from a mail carrier who delivered to the Mendel home in 1993. She previously testified she saw a figure, a shadow, who wasn't Deborah Mendel in Mendel's doorway while delivering mail at about 12:30 p.m. on the day that Mendel was killed. Testimony is scheduled to continue on Tuesday.
And flipping over to sports, I was going to start with the Buffalo Bills, but I think I'm going to go with this goodwill story about the Sabres goalie Colton Ellis. If someone had told Colton Ellis on the 5th of October 2025 that he would help a team make the Stanley Cup playoffs, he may have doubted the messenger. He was preparing to open his 5th season of professional hockey in the American Hockey League. Ellis' situation changed in a matter of hours after the Sabres picked up Ellis on waivers on the 6th of October, a day before the start of the NHL season. The Buffalo Sabres rookie goalie never discounted the idea of playing in the NHL, though. Once Ellis joined the Sabres ahead of their season opener on the 9th of October, he set a goal for himself: stay in the NHL. It would have been pretty hard to believe, Ellis said Monday at United Center when he looked back at the start of October. I always dreamed and hoped that one day I'd play in the NHL, and I think it happened pretty quick from the time I got picked up on waivers here. To look back at where I was then versus now, it's a pretty incredible thing. It's been an eventful year for Ellis, to say the least. He began the season in the St. Louis Blues organization, set to play for the Springfield Thunderbirds of the AHL. He's gone from being a pickup off waivers as insurance of sort of Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, or UPL, absence due to a lower body injury in October, to helping the Sabres earn their first playoff berth since 2011. 4 days after registering his first NHL shutout with 37 saves and a 5-0 win against the Columbus Blue Jackets on Thursday at KeyBank Center, Ellis prepared to back up UPL in goal Monday against the Chicago Blackhawks in United Center. The Sabres began the week with 2 final regular season games, one they already played, which they won, by the way, against the Blackhawks. The Stanley Cup playoffs open on Saturday. It might be against the Boston Bruins or Washington Capitals. The Sabres seed in the playoff and the first round opponents is still not known. Ellis, who's 25, has become a key part of the Sabres goaltending stable. He can come off the bench in a pinch to earn a valuable win, as he did January 27th in Toronto, or fill in for the injured Alex Lyon in the Sabres' recent goaltending rotation, as he did against the Blue Jackets. Ellis is 8-4-1 with a .904 save percentage and a 2.91 goals against average with 1 shutout in 15 games. UPL is 21-93 with a .909 save percentage at a 2.56 goals against average and 1 shutout in 34 games, and Lyon, who's 20-10 and 4 with a .904 save percentage and 2.77 goals against average with 3 shutouts. Right from the start, it was something that I was super excited to get the opportunity to be here, Ellis said Monday. My goal from the start of the year was to stay here for the whole year. Ultimately, that happened. There's a lot of people that helped me get here, including everybody in the room and all the staff. He's gotten those welcome to the NHL kids moments too. The first time he faced the Oilers, he made 32 saves and a 5-1 win on November 17th in KeyBank Center. Ellis learned how to face some of the sport's top-tier players without getting overwhelmed. Playing Connor McDavid, that was one of my first few games in the league, he said. Getting to go up against them on NHL ice, that's pretty cool, Ellis said. I had skated with them both at a BioSteel camp a couple years ago, so I've been on the ice with them, but when you're playing in an actual game against them, it's a little different. That and playing against Alex Ovechkin in Washington a couple weeks ago and guys like that. Ellis also learned the nuances of being a professional hockey player, enjoying every day in the NHL, bringing your best every day, consistency in building and maintaining habits, being prepared to be called upon at a moment's notice, whether it's as a backup in a game or starting, as he did last week against Columbus, his first start since the 3rd of February in a 4-3 overtime loss to Tampa Bay. Focusing on each day rather than looking at a date that's a few days away on the calendar, that's especially relevant now as the Sabres begin the playoffs within a matter of days, but need the last 3 days of the regular season to determine their own standings. We're trying to win hockey games, Sabre coach Lindy Ruff said, ahead of the game against the Blackhawks, which they won. Our goal tonight is to play a good game, win a game. There's no bad teams left. Whatever those other teams do, they're going to take care of their business, and we're going to try to take care of ours. That's all you can ask for.
And on that positive note, we need to talk about that glorious bright green jacket. More major wins are likely for McIlroy on Journey. Royal McIlroy went from becoming the 6th player with the career Grand Slam to only the 4th player to win the Masters 2 years in a row. Jack Nicklaus and Tiger Woods are the only other players to occupy both clubs. Elite company, indeed. If joining the first group wasn't difficult enough for McIlroy, 11 years of trying to get the final leg of the Grand Slam, then winning his second Masters green jacket was a clear reminder of how hard it was to get there. I thought it was so difficult to win last year because of trying to win the Masters and the Grand Slam, McIlroy said. And then this year I realized it's just really difficult to win the Masters. So where does he go from here? McIlroy went into a funk last year after fulfilling a lifelong dream. He became irritated by endless questions about what would motivate him, which mountain was next to scale, when all he wanted to do was soak it all in. He finally got back on track at the Irish Open. That doesn't sound like it will be a problem this time around. I felt like the Grand Slam was the destination, and then I realized it wasn't, McIlroy said, after ending another wild Sunday afternoon at Augusta National with a one-shot win over Scottie Scheffler. I just won my 6th major, and I feel like I'm in a really good spot with my game and my body, he said. I don't want to put a number on it, but I feel like this win is just, I don't want to say a stop on the journey. It's just part of the journey. Trying to put a number on how many majors he will win began long before he won his first Masters, much less the second one. McIlroy won his first major in the 2011 U.S. Open at Congressional by shattering the 72-hole scoring record at 268. That prompted Padraig Harrington to say, if you're going to talk about someone challenging Jack's record, then here is your man. Nicklaus has the gold standard of 18 majors. Woods is next at 15. McIlroy is at 6, tied with Nick Faldo, Lee Trevino, and Phil Mickelson. Fred Couples piled on this week when he said on Thursday, by the way, Rory may never lose this thing again after last year. And the following day, Couples added, I mean, he really could win 5 more of these. Easy, right? Yeah, I don't make it easy, McIlroy said. I used to make it easy back in my early 20s when I was winning these things by 8 shots. He still holds the PGA Championship record for margin of victory when he won at Kauai Island by 8 shots back in 2012, the year after his 8-shot victory at Congressional. No, it's just hard. It's hard to win golf tournaments, especially around here, he said. You've had maybe a couple of runaway winners over the years, but it always seems to be a very tight finish at this golf course. It wasn't easy a year ago when he lost a Sunday lead once on the front 9 and twice on the back 9 before beating Justin Rose in a playoff. And it didn't look that way this time when he lost a 6-shot lead on Saturday and then twice found himself 2 shots behind different players, Cameron Young on the front 9 and Justin Rose on the back. Scottie Scheffler was in range and had to settle for making 11 straight pars. Young had birdie putts on 8 straight holes on the back 9 and converted none of them. And then McIlroy was a whisker away from trouble over the final hour. The wedge that barely cleared the false front on the 15th, a sporty up and down from off the 17th green that gave him a 2-shot cushion going to the last hole, and a drive so far right McIlroy wasn't sure where it was when he walked off the tee. It ended with more joy than relief, a big difference from a year ago. The only tears came when he spoke to his parents, who were not at Augusta a year ago and had to be persuaded to come this year because they didn't want to jinx him. With a bogey on the last hole he could afford, it ended with a 1-shot advantage over Scheffler, the number 1 player in the world. This was the first time since the 2002 U.S. Open that the top two players in the world, Woods and Phil Mickelson, like Bethpage Black, were the top two at a major. McIlroy and Scheffler have combined to win 4 of the last 5 majors. Scheffler is a U.S. Open short of joining the career Grand Slam club, and his position at number 1 in the world is not threatened even after McIlroy's latest Masters title. I've competed against him for a long time, and you don't win the amount of tournaments that he's won out here without being pretty resilient, Scheffler said. McIlroy is the first player since Adam Scott back in 2013 to have taken 3 weeks off before winning the Masters. There's a sense that will be part of his plan going forward, when possible. He felt like more than an honorary member as many trips as he took to Augusta in the last few weeks. I think it's a good blueprint, McIlroy said. I'm not going to take 3 weeks off before every major. When I've talked to Jack Nicklaus over the years, how he prepares for majors, and he would go the week before and he would simulate a tournament. I think that's certainly a good way to prepare going into the next majors. The next one starts May 15th, another stop in the journey without needing to set a target for how many in the end.
And you are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time is 31 minutes past the hour. So we'll move over to a little bit of baseball. Apparently there's some complaints. The robot umps have time on their hands. With automated ball strike system, games are taking longer. It could be argued that the automated ball strike system has been the MVP, or Major League Baseball, through the season's first 2.5 weeks, creating a game within the game that's producing winners, losers, and some dramatic moments. There appears to be at least one trade-off. The robot umpires could be one of the factors making games a little longer this spring, with the time of a 9-inning game creeping upwards to 2 hours and 42 minutes through Saturday, according to Baseball Reference. That's up from 2 hours and 38 minutes last season and 2 hours and 36 minutes in 2024. The slightly longer game makes sense. Even though an ABS challenge usually takes less than 15 seconds, the many delays in the game can add up if several pitches are contested. One of MLB's big wins over the past decade is the rules package that debuted in 2023, which included a pitch clock that dramatically shortened games by roughly 25 minutes. Though there were scattered complaints about the changes, they've been widely viewed as a success. The ABS system might be making a small dent in that progress, but games times are still considerably shorter than they were in the pre-pitch clock era. A 9-inning game lasted an average of 3 hours and 10 minutes in 2021, an all-time high.
Hey, get some popcorn.
And a triple threat. 2-time All-Star Corbin Carroll is off to a good start against this season with a .327 batting average and 1.067 OPS, and the young star has developed a signature play that's increasingly rare in today's game, the triple. The 25-year-old speedster leads the major with 3 triples in just 14 games. He's paced the big leagues in triples over the past 2 seasons with 17 in 2025 and 14 in 2024. The D-backs, home of Chase Field, has been a perfect fit for Carroll, featuring a deep power alley in right center that forces outfielders to cover a lot of ground while he motors around the bases. Carroll is already 6th among active MLB players with 46 triples. And the Phillies bullpen looks strong. Manager Rob Thomason realized how fortunate the Philadelphia Phillies are to already have their bullpen lining up so smoothly in April with depth and matchups and shutdown pitching too. That includes reliable closer Johan Duran handling 9th inning duties. He already had 5 saves and a 1.35 ERA. That's fantastic. The Philadelphia relievers surrendered only 1 earned run during the club's recent 6-game trip, spanning 18 innings by the bullpen for a 0.50 ERA and a .129 opponent batting average, 8 for 62. Rookie top prospect Andrew Painter appreciates all of the relievers backing him. Painter gave up 4 runs in 4 innings in a game last week against the Giants, but the bullpen pitched 5 scoreless innings that gave the Phillies time to rally for a 6-4 win. They stepped up to go out there and throw up 5 more zeros after that, Painter said. Offense stepped up. I'm super happy that everyone could pick me up. And who's hot? After a disappointing 2025 season, St. Louis Cardinals outfielder Jordan Walker is showing why he's considered one of the game's top young players. The 23-year-old has already hit 7 homers this season, including 6 over the past 8 games. Walker is batting .327 with a 1.138 OPS through 15 games, leading the Cardinal teams that's off to a solid 8-7 start.
And let's talk about racing. Committed Bell shows he can win a truck race. In Bristol, Tennessee, Christopher Bell still knows how to drive a truck. The NASCAR Cup regular proved that point by capturing Friday's Tennessee Army National Guard 250, and that was at Bristol Motor Speedway. That was just so awesome to win a truck race. It's been since 2017 since I've won one of these things, Bell said. A record 7 Cup regulars were entered, but nobody could match Bell. Driving for the unsung Halmer Friesen Racing team, co-owned by Truck Series veteran Stuart Friesen, Bell controlled the final 63 laps en route to his 8th career Truck Series victory. It's special for me to be able to race with these guys, Bell said. These wins mean a lot to this team and the organization. The victory was also significant to Bell, who has previous victories at Bristol in the Cup and O'Reilly Series. Bell took the 2025 Food City Night Race at BMS. Bristol is such an awesome racetrack, Bell said. You have the short track racing with intermediate speeds. Chandler Smith, Gio Ruggiero, Ross Chastain, and Christian X rounded out the top 5. X led the most laps with 132, but he was involved in an incident with Corey Heim shortly after a restart, and that was on lap 174. Heim, who was gunning for the $350,000 bonus, was forced to settle for the number 30th finishing spot after his truck slammed into the outside wall following contact from X. Heim had led parts of the past 28 races. I don't think X did anything on purpose, Heim said. Having the lead and track position was super important to win this race. I had an issue with my transmission sticking into gears. I don't think I touched X to get him out of the way. I just packed some air and got him free. We are all good. With a textbook pass on the outside lane, Bell grabbed the lead on lap 187, and then he simply drove away. Bell said he received a call from Halmer Friesen Racing officials last year, shortly after Friesen suffered serious injuries during a dirt race, and that was in Quebec. We went to Watkins Glen and almost got a win, and they've been working really hard to get back to victory lane, Bell said. When Stewart and crew chief Jimmy Villeneuve called me about this opportunity to run some races this year, I was like, heck yeah, let's do it. Before Friday's practice session, track officials applied a new round of PJ1 traction compound that forced drivers to remain on the dominant lower lane of the track for most of that night. With a lap of 15.066 seconds at 127.360 miles per hour, Caden Honeycutt earned his second pole of the season. Honeycutt maintained the lead until the third lap when X went to the front. In a scene familiar to old-school BMS fans, drivers became increasingly frustrated as they were unable to get around the slower trucks. Two-time series champion Ben Rhodes was the first driver to venture into the upper lane on lap 62. X captured the first stage, leading 64 laps. Following a caution period where Rhodes and his crew decided against a pit stop, Rhodes was in the lead on lap 127, and he held on for first career stage win at BMS. Kyle Busch, a 23-time race winner at BMS, was in the front at the onset of the third stage with Heim and Bell close behind. Busch maintained the lead until lap 174 when his engine didn't refire during an attempt to save fuel. While Busch dropped to the number 10 spot, X took the lead and held on until the crucial incident with Heim. Obviously, it wasn't intentional to spin him or to even hit him, X said. I was just trying to get in line and I misjudged it and he ended up wrecking pretty hard. I feel pretty small right now about that. Busch settled for 8th place.
And moving over to Asking Eric. Dear Eric, I've recently started dating someone who is what you'd call extremely online. She's really active on a bunch of different platforms: Reddit, TikTok, Instagram, Twitch. It's kind of her whole life. She has a whole community of friends she only knows online, and she's pretty popular on some of the sites. That's fine with me. It's basically none of my business, but I found out from a friend that she has been posting about me and our relationship on some of these sites. She didn't tell me directly, and I didn't see them because I'm the opposite of her. I'm really not interested in being online much at all. My friend sent me some of the links, and it wasn't bad stuff per se, just her talking about going out to dinner with me, or one time her complaining about how I sleep and asking for advice. Seeing people reply about me was really weird. They don't even know me, and I don't think I sleep that weird. I don't know if I should talk to her about this or not. Signed, Privacy Please. Dear Privacy, when you write, I don't know if I should talk to her about this, I'm presuming the this is her posting about your relationship in general and not just the sleeping thing. If that's the case, then emphatically, yes, you should talk to her about it. You can also talk about your shared sleep habits, but that's a secondary conversation. It's important that you're both able to feel seen, heard, and accepted in this relationship. She may not realize what she's sharing about you crosses a line. By talking about it, using I statements like I'm not comfortable having strangers know details about my life, you find a common ground and get to know each other better. This is also an opportunity to listen. Ask her what she gets from sharing her life online, and if there's ways that you can support that or even participate should your comfort level allow it. Dear Eric, my toxic alcoholic brother is 2 years older than me. We are both around 70, and over the last 20 years or so, he has been estranged off and on from various family members, including our parents, now deceased, his children, and me. We currently have a civil relationship, but we are not close. His mental and physical health has been in decline, and I have to respond to his medical emergencies several times because we live in the same town and his two sons live out of state. One son has a strained relationship with him at best, and the other son will have nothing to do with him. He's getting close to the point where he will need to move to an assisted living facility, and he will need some assistance with choosing a place, managing the finances. He has the income but is careless with money, and eventually moving into the facility where he can get more care. Although I do not want to totally abandon my brother, I wrestle with having the burden of continuing to help him with these life issues. I have a good relationship with his sons, but I feel like they need to step up and get more involved despite all of the history and baggage they have with their father. I have plenty of reasons to be resentful of my brother, but I feel an obligation to be some support because no one else will do it. Frankly, I'm tired of being good old Uncle Fred, but my nephews seem just fine letting me handle everything. What can I do, or am I stuck with this? Signed, Worn Out Brother. Dear brother, it's fair to express these feelings to your nephews and to your brother if he still has the mental capacity to process what you're saying. These aren't petty complaints. You're feeling the weight of being a caretaker, and you're asking the family unit as a whole, how are we going to handle this? Next steps for you and for your nephews can look different depending on each individual's capacity and on your brother's financial status. You may find, for instance, that he's in a position to hire a senior life manager or financial guardian and thereby reduce some of the decisions that need to be made. Your nephews may set a boundary for how much they can or want to help their father, and this doesn't necessarily mean you need to fill in all the cracks. Indeed, it will be helpful for you also to figure out where your boundaries are and where you need to step back and call in reinforcements, be it a relative, a professional, or some other form of assistance.
And Ohio nursing homes are dumping patients at homeless shelters. Columbus. The scene was concerning enough to prompt the homeless shelter staff to call the fire department. A woman using a walker had shown up, incontinent, and carrying a large bag of medications. She was diabetic, managing a tibia fracture and alcohol-related dementia, and she was dumped at the shelter, according to federal inspectors. The staff members said resident number 83 was unclear of what was going on, scared, and not sure who dropped her off there. Inspectors for the Centers for Medical and Medicaid Services, which funds most nursing home care in the United States, wrote after an August 3, 2023 inspection. The incident was what industry experts described as a rare but increasingly common instance of a nursing home in Ohio transferring its patients, who are often older, poor, and medically frail, to a homeless shelter. CMS has faulted Eastland and 6 others in the past few years related to efforts to discharge patients to homeless shelters, most of which were ultimately carried out. The woman had been caught drinking beer at her residence in the Eastland Rehabilitation and Nursing Center in Columbus, prompting an involuntary discharge. Staff tried to get her into rehabilitation for substance use, but no beds were immediately available. Eastland staff never called the county's psychiatric bed board to find a spot for the woman, according to the inspectors. Instead, they took her to the shelter. There, about 100 people sat ahead of her on the waiting list. The shelter at first declined to admit the woman, leaving her outside in the late summer heat. Staff eventually relented, letting her sit in the lobby with a glass of cold water while they summoned a city rapid response team, including the fire department and a social worker. Neither Eastland nor the CMS inspectors could locate the woman by the time the report was published. In addition, the events of what occurred at the Addiction Recovery Center, or why resident number 83 ended up at the homeless shelter, could not be determined, as the facility was unable to provide any additional information regarding resident number 83. And that's what the inspection report stated. The administrator at Eastland declined to return phone calls about the inspection. Facility staff declined to provide contact information for Garden Healthcare, the corporate owner of the nursing home, which operates 5 other facilities, according to CMS data. It doesn't publish any contact information online. Most of the patients in these situations are older, homeless, unemployed, and they lack the support of networks of family or friends that might be checking in on them, according to Chip Wilkins, who leads the City of Dayton's Long-Term Care Ombudsman program, which acts as a legal advocate for long-term care patients. We are starting to deal with it more and more. The facilities are so closely monitored on discharges, but yet they still try and send them to hospitals and not take them back, or they drop them off at homeless shelters, he said in an interview. I would say certainly over the last 6 months there has been an uptick. Lalani Pelletier, the statewide ombudsman, said she didn't have ready access to data that could confirm whether the discharges to homeless shelters have increased in frequency statewide. But healthcare is as subject to macroeconomic forces like inflation as other sectors of the economy. And Medicaid, which pays for most nursing care, is under increasing cost pressure as federal lawmakers have reduced program funds. The challenges nursing facilities in Ohio are facing reflect a broader and concerning trend affecting facilities across the country, said Scott Wiley in a statement, CEO of the Ohio Healthcare Association, an industry trade group. This issue has been growing as more residents face unstable housing, he said. State oversight and resources are needed to help tackle the issue on a larger scale to find meaningful, long-term solutions for Ohioans who struggle with homelessness. It will require a collaborative approach that a single nursing facility provider is not equipped to manage on their own. The state ombudsman office gets copies of every involuntary discharge from a nursing home in Ohio. One of the first things they check, Wilson said, is the proposed discharge location. Homeless shelter discharges are priority cases because they're almost always unsafe, he said. They can't manage the 10 to 20 medications they might need daily. Some rely on wheelchairs or even walkers. Invariably, that ends up being a horrible experience for the individual because they'll go to the shelter and typically within 2 or 3 days the shelter will send them to the hospital because they can't meet their needs. Often the issues trace back to insurers, including Medicaid and Medicare, that cut off residents' benefits. Sometimes the facilities cite aggressive behavior or substance use. Homeless shelters aren't built to handle medically fragile patients. They aren't medical centers. Some may require residents to climb to a top bunk, a tall task for an older patient. Marcus Roth, Director of Communications of the Coalition on Homelessness and Housing in Ohio, said the practice puts the shelters in a tight spot. They're tending to a population they're not equipped to handle, but they're also the de facto safety net. The emergency shelter system, to the extent we have a system, is often the only thing available when other interventions don't work. Pelletier emphasized in an interview that such involuntary discharges to shelters against residents' wishes are rare. That said, she estimates about 13,000 Ohioans are discharged from a nursing home each month. Nursing homes, she said, have legal obligations to make sure that discharges are safe and appropriate. And it's not up to the facility, she said, to unilaterally decide where a person should go. Whether a shelter is safe and appropriate is a fact-specific question. Pelletier said there are instances where it could be, pending the care needs of the resident and abilities of the shelter. It's the kind of thing that ombudsmen hone in on when reviewing discharges. The real issue is when people are discharged to a homeless shelter and there's been no work or investigation done on if that would be safe or appropriate, she said. Wow.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before.
Mm-mm.
So, just a little thing about Catholics in the United States. Many are dismayed by Trump's attack on the Pope. A majority of U.S. Catholic voters supported Donald Trump in his 2024 presidential victory. Yet across the broad Catholic political spectrum, even among conservative-leaning bishops, there is dismay over Trump's unprecedented verbal assault on Pope Leo XIV, the first American to lead their church. Leo says he is sharing a gospel message and does not directly attack Trump or anyone else with his appeals for peace and criticism of attitudes fueling the war. Criticism of Trump came from Archbishop Paul Coakley, head of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, and from Minnesota-based Bishop Robert Barron, who only a few days ago was applauding Trump as an Easter guest at the White House. Barron called the president's remarks entirely inappropriate and disrespectful and urged him to apologize. The dismay extended into an even more solid base of Trump support, conservative Christian evangelicals. Many were appalled that Trump followed his Truth Social attack on Leo by posting an image depicting him as a Christ-like savior. "Take this down, Mr. President," posted David Brody, a prominent Trump-supporting commentator with the Christian Broadcasting Network. "You're not God. None of us are. This goes too far. It crosses the line." By midday Monday, the image had been taken down from Truth Social, and speaking at the White House, the president claimed that he never intended to liken himself to Jesus when he posted the picture. "How did they come up with that?" he asked. "It's supposed to be me as a doctor, making people better. And I do make people better. I make people a lot better." On his clash with the Pope, Trump was equally defiant. "There's nothing to apologize for. He's wrong." The president's feud with American religious communities comes just 6 months before voting begins in this fall's midterm as Trump grapples with low approval ratings and dissension from his MAGA base over the war with Iran. But few groups of voters have been more loyal to Trump and important to his political success than those on the religious right. For now, some Trump allies are optimistic that the dispute will soon be forgotten. There is a deep reservoir of appreciation for the president and his faith-based policies that transcends and eclipses any disagreement over a social media post, Ralph Reed, who sits on the president's faith advisory board, told the Associated Press. Through American history, numerous U.S. presidents have had policy differences with various popes, but experts on the Vatican and religious history could recall no exchange comparable to the back and forth between Trump and Leo over the Pope's condemnation of America's role in Iran war. This is unprecedented criticism of a pope from a U.S. President. David Campbell, a political science professor at the University of Notre Dame, said via email. There have been signs that many lay Catholics have been standing by Trump in recent weeks and have been critical of their bishops who critique the president, Campbell added. If this attack on the Pope does not shift that dynamic in a marked way, it will truly be a watershed moment, with American Catholics choosing a Catholic-baiting president over their own pope. Looking far back into world history, Trump's attempt to strong-arm Pope Leo isn't anything new, said Kathleen Sprouse-Cumming, a professor of American Studies and History at Notre Dame. Emperors, monarchs, and despots have long threatened popes in an effort to force them to bend to their will, she said via email. In an American context, however, Trump's invective does not represent a historic reversal.
It does represent.
It does. Excuse me. That was oof. For most of this country's history, Americans viewed the Pope as warmongering, money-grubbing, anti-democratic menace who had designs on the White House, she added. Today, the menace is in the White House, and the Pope is the one defending the ideals of liberty and human dignity. There was no immediate comment about the Trump rift from Vice President Vance, a Catholic convert who occasionally had sparred with Catholic leaders over their criticism of the Trump's administration immigration crackdown.
You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for today, Tuesday, April 14th. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings, 9 a.m., and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been Lori and
Lita.
Thank you so much for listening. Have a great rest of your day.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. Radio Reading mails out a large print program schedule to our listeners every other month. If you have not received a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service large print program schedule in the mail, please call us at 716-821-5555. We will make sure that you receive one every other month. A Braille version of the schedule is also available upon request. Our number again is 716-821-5555. Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the supermarket ads. At noon, we have the USA Today. Stay with us for these readings and more. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which may